post-processing?
So I actually just send it to someone to get edited. That is way above my skill set, and I would end up breaking everything that I owned out of frustration. So it's better for everybody involved.
Yeah.
But they do a lot. They've been doing roughly like 6 clips, so similar to other big podcasts to try to generate traffic. So it's kind of it's tedious on their end for sure.
Yeah. I was going through it. They do all the fancy angles, cutting back and
Yeah, so I'll have my Logitech camera, and then I'll have like my iPhone recording somewhere else. That way it gives the illusion of being in person kind of and having options.
Eventually we'll have some sort of device that'll just give us a 3D rendering, and then you'll just have these 2 floating talking heads.
Oh yeah, that'd be wonderful. Probably easier too.
I don't know about that. Every step in the technology direction seems to have unintended consequences.
That is true.
I'm a little wishy-washy today. What would you like to speak about? And should we, I usually just cut in when we get interesting. Would you like to do some pre-chatting?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a good. I try to do that too, because sometimes it just starts taking on a life of its own, and you're like, "This is good. I'll hit record."
Okay. So you're fine
whatever you want. Yeah,
it just slips in. Okay.
Yeah.
What would you like to cover today, or what's been itching you lately?
Everything itches me lately.
Yeah, like political psoriasis or something.
Yeah, seriously, I can't. Like, I have to take timeouts off of Twitter because it really bothers me, because I have a 15-month-old, and we're already trying to figure out schools because they start at 18 months now, which is really crazy. And I live in North Carolina, so I thought that we were going to be immune to a lot of the crap that you're seeing, which is not the case. So they're teaching critical race theory to 18-month-olds. So I've been really focused a lot on education and just kind of what I can do as a parent to make sure that he's not being told he's a bad person because his skin is fair, or, you know what I mean? Like these kinds of things. I obviously have spent a lot of time in porn, and there's a lot going on with that. So I feel like people think that's interesting.
There's a lot going on. Did you not know that?
Well, yeah. So like Utah just put that filter on, which I actually was in support of.
What's like Utah?
So Utah is trying to pass a bill that makes any device sold in the state that it has a filter that you can't access adult material. Okay. So some porn stars are like, "This is anti-American." Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, did you read the article, though? It's a filter that you can turn off if you're an adult. It's strictly just to prohibit children from going on. I actually support that. I think that's a good idea. And it's not something that's permanent. So you still have access. I don't understand the problem. So there's that. Obviously, the scandal with Pornhub and Visa and MasterCard pulling out.
With regards to trafficking allegations?
Yeah, there was like there were trafficking allegations and abuse allegations. Obviously, that content exists on every single platform, so I find that to be a little bit interesting.
What are your thoughts about the developmental impact of porn on young people, specifically teens, girls and boys?
So it's complicated. Do you know Dr. Deborah So is? Yeah, so I talked to her a little bit about it, and obviously everyone is human, so they still have an opinion, and it's hard to take that aspect out of even something that's black and white, like research, right? Like you can research and have an end goal that proves your point either way. But she was saying that it really doesn't have that much of an effect. I don't know. I do think that we're always influenced by the content we're digesting, so I think it seems natural that would have an effect. I think more parents have to talk about it. I definitely think it's reckless to have free content. I'm a very big advocate of having all explicit content behind a paywall, which again is not a popular opinion in people in my industry, because they're like, it's the man, trying to abolish us and regulate us. And I was like, well, there might, you have to regulate a lot of other things. We regulate alcohol, we regulate tobacco, there's gun regulations. This can be potentially harmful. So I do think that there maybe needs to be a little bit of monitoring happening.
It sounds like your industry is filled with a lot of libertarians.
I would say they're more just liberal, like left,
Oh,
liberal.
really?
Yeah. Like I'm seen as like the devil by a lot of my
You're an outcast.
yeah, I'm an outcast in an outcast group. Like it's,
right.
I can't be more on the fringes.
Yeah.
But a lot of them don't have kids. So,
Yeah.
they're just not looking at it the same way.
I've been waiting for one of these websites to implement some sort of equity of orgasm where you have to indulge in a specific. You have to distribute your indulgences across racial lines, so you get like equal pay to every category. I don't know if
Well,
that would ever
that's
take
interesting
off,
too, because so when it comes to race, and obviously there's still a lot of very racist porn as far as the language goes. Like there's a lot of slurs being used, and they have the guys dressed in a very stereotypical way, like, the baggy pants and whatever. So girls kind of charge more to do those kinds of scenes, and they're also marketed more. So marketed in a different way. Again, I think you get to charge what you want. It's your body, but that's now
Yeah.
controversial and that's racist. So you're not allowed to do that. It's just, it's wild. These people are losing their minds.
Yeah, I do wonder, because of the way in which our brains are wired, when something is put off limits, like it starts to take on a erotic charge. And a lot of CRT and its derivatives, what can be called wokeness in general, is about going around and saying what's problematic. So
Right.
I wonder in 10 years, like all those problematic things are going to become fetishes, just because a lot of young people are growing up in this. There's all these boundaries and stuff, and then they'll start to eroticize that. What are your
That's
thoughts on
interesting.
the way in which fetish or stereotypes attract attention in an erotic fashion?
I think you kind of nailed it. We're attracted to things that are off limits because it gives us that rush or that thrill, and a lot of people live very boring lives. So it's an attainable way to kind of get that adrenaline spike.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think a lot of it's also just what you see in TV, right? Like rap videos, like they're telling you what's sexy, what should be a turn on. And I don't know, when I was talking to Deborah, she was talking about paraphilias, so like weird kinks that people have. And she was saying a lot of it is biological. Like it just, you show up with a different brain. So someone who's maybe super into feet, like they're a different part of their brain lights up when they see feet. That doesn't happen for people that don't see them in a sexual manner. And then a lot of times it's just having a positive non-sexual experience as a young person, and then that somehow gets sexually charged after puberty. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Is with regards to creating that kind of content, you have the base content that everybody wants, and then there's all these ways of dressing that up or making that a little bit more special. And one constant criticism from a certain perspective is that exposure to porn necessarily creates the desire for more and more depraved so-called content. I don't think that that's necessarily true, but we do have to keep it interesting. And if you take the morality out of that, that's kind of where the creativity is. Is that where the creativity is with regards to producing that? And
Yeah, as the creator.
yeah, as a creator.
A little bit. I've kind of always done softer style stuff. I've never been an extreme performer, and I've been filming now for 10 years. So, I mean, there definitely was a ramp up in my career, but it still stopped at some point. Like I didn't go over a certain threshold.
Yeah.
And then when it pertains to the consumer, especially when you start getting into darker kinds of content, when those people were actually interviewed in a non-judgmental space and they were compelled to be more truthful about what their actual interests were, they had always been into that dark content. It just took them a while for them to be okay with it and then start, kind of consuming that.
Yeah.
So the whole argument of porn causes pedophiles or porn causes abusers is that there's no factual basis to that. At the same time, I do, and again, this isn't a popular opinion, I do think certain content maybe shouldn't be allowed to be posted. I don't know. Like I've seen some really brutal stuff, like girls getting black eyes or permanent marking, broken bones, like these kinds of things. Like that's not okay. That's not okay. I don't like if you find that sexually arousing, there's some kind of trauma that you have to unpack. You should probably talk to somebody. I think there is still a line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the Army Hammer guy, right? Like that was going on. Like the
Did
guy
you
that had
really
the
look into that?
cannibalism.
I only saw the headlines because I didn't want to dive into it too much.
I
but
didn't
he's
want to
got
look
kind of
too much into it. My girlfriend was obsessed with it because she like listens to all of those serial killer podcasts, and she's like, "Did you hear about this guy?" So she just told me about it. But essentially, he had a cannibalism fetish, and he was trying to pretend to eat his girlfriend's flesh, and like talked about murdering her and these things, and while he's getting aroused. And I feel like the line is before that. The line is before that.
Yeah. Yeah. So to keep something interesting, though, you can make it more salty or more spicy, or you can just go for a brute. You can just ramp up the extremity and push that. But once you get to a certain level, how do you keep it interesting?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I feel like whatever you're into, you're just into. Like you don't necessarily need it to kind of be constantly elevating. I don't know. Like I'm a pretty simple person when it comes to being like sexually satisfied. Like I don't need a circus act or anything like that. I think something as simple as just nuance and environment. So different backgrounds, different like locations, outfits, I think is huge, especially for men. Like they love seeing that aspect.
On the female, or
Yeah.
on the objective desire.
Yeah. So I think that's big. So just like keeping that visual changing, I think is important.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that they need a difference in extremities. Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing about OnlyFans is that what is then so there's the the thing that people are after and paying money for, but then what's dressing that up is this simulated relationship with the individual. So what they're doing, what's being expanded upon that basis of a sexual transaction of some sort is a human transaction or something simulating a human. So when you develop your character, I mean, you are the first person that I've interviewed with a registered trademark on their alternative name. So you actually have intentionally created like this individual, and then people have a relationship to that individual. Or is that kind of what happens? And how do you manage that and produce that as a personality? And that translates to what I'm doing here, being a personality too. Like how do you conceptualize that and then work that and see what's working and change things up?
So part of having the alter ego is really helpful for me. I think it helps me when I'm in, like, I guess situations I would never find myself in a day-to-day life, right? Exchanging with complete strangers in this intimate way. So it helps me get this confidence that's absolutely necessary to be successful in that field. I think it can be problematic if you spend too much time in that fictitious person, especially with this industry, because you start to value things that maybe don't serve you in the best way, like material things or like clout, that kind of thing. So I think it's important to place your value in the real person that you identify with. And the other one can kind of help you to be that performer that you need to be. So I don't know. It's kind of like compartmentalization, right? So for anyone that has like a stressful job, I think it's important to be able to take that jacket off, if you so to speak, and leave that there. Because sometimes, I mean, I get really intimate messages about people that have been paralyzed and couldn't interact with other people, so they used porn as a way to like interact with women and get their confidence back. Like that's heavy. I've talked to people that have been very depressed, or marriages that have been falling apart. So there's still like a really complicated psychological side of the industry that people don't talk about because they just think that it's, it's crude and there's no morals and it's just sex on this pedestal. But there can be a lot of other things behind it that you have to deal with as a performer. We have stalkers that get really intense.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, because they see you in these intimate settings, so they feel a different kind of connection to you than, say, a mainstream actor. So yeah, there can be a lot of heavy stuff, and then you have to deal with societal guilt and societal shame and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's really important to have two versions to be able to tackle that.
There can be like a courtesan therapist thing that happens where you end up witnessing a lot of the baggage that people are going through.
Oh yeah.
And I guess you probably have to separate yourself from that. But are you ever tempted to like attracted to fixing the other person that's exposing to their vulnerability to you? And have you in your trajectory, have you like learned your lesson of not to do that? Was there a moment where you're like, yeah, I'm not doing this or something like that?
Yeah, I've definitely felt the pull to try to fix or try to help. I went to school for psychology. That's always been very fascinating to me. And then when you start, I don't know, getting these intimate details about how someone's life isn't where they want it to be, that's all you know. Like, you don't have any further context. I'm definitely not a professional by any means, and I wouldn't want to steer someone in the wrong direction. And anytime that I've tried to give book recommendations, because I feel like that's a safe zone, right? Like, I'm not giving you advice, but I might suggest some books that might lead you on your own path to fixing whatever ails you. A lot of times they take that as like a foot in the door, and then they get more invasive, and then you're no longer this fictitious like sexual object. You're now something more, and I think that can be dangerous. So I think it's really important to still have that professional boundary, like, this is what it is and this is fine, but you're not really allowed to go further into my world.
What is your opinion of men dealing with their attention in such an intense way?
Can you elaborate?
I know that's a really big question, but
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, what can we learn from your expertise of capturing men's attention and then kind of ricocheting that into something that they want? You know, you're dealing with men's desire, and do men have a very specific desire? What is the quality of that? And how do we understand what a man is by dealing with what a man wants?
What's really important when it comes to the insight that people in my position have, especially with men, I don't feel like men feel that they have a safe space to talk about what they're going through. We have this expectation that they're not supposed to really express their feelings, especially nowadays. It's like we are so eager to attack and tear down men that it's even harder than I think it might have been in the 50s, right? Like, men don't cry, boys don't cry. That was a narrative that we told. And now we have these men that now started to feel safe to express their emotions, but now the main narrative in the culture wars are that all men are bad. So when you talk to these men in a space where they feel safe and no one's really judging, there's this intimate setting, they're more willing to be vulnerable. And you see how a lot of them don't have healthy outlets, and masculinity is not being, I don't even want to say promoted, but rewarded, right? Like, that's now a bad thing. And I think it's really important for men to have an outlet. They've always had a purpose. That purpose was to protect and to hunt and to kind of like be that leader. And now we're saying all of these things are bad because all of us women don't need no man, right? So it's like, what does he do? So I think it's really important for men to try to find a purpose and an outlet for these like biological needs, right? Like, there's all of these men's spaces that aren't being promoted because they don't want to be found out and taken down. But my husband's in a really good one called Principal Savage, and it's basically like a tactile course. So they incorporate psychology and similar training for like Navy SEALs and Delta Force. So it's a lot of gun and close combat, and then they'll take you to the side and break down psychologically what's happening. These things are super, super important. So what I've learned is that the women in these men's lives need to kind of create a space where they can share what's going on with them in a non-judgmental way. So a lot of these guys aren't saying what their problems are to their partner because they don't trust their partner to accept it and listen and want to solve it with them. they were just like, oh, she'll blow up. I can't tell her that. We'll get in a fight or she'll leave me. That's not a good relationship.
Okay. Yeah. It seems like it might be the case that men, generally speaking, absolutely generally speaking, and there's always outliers, I'm probably an outlier in this, have a narrow range, a narrow palette to paint with when describing their emotions. When you brought up what you brought up about Navy SEALs, goal-oriented behavior, and I think that in a certain respect, pornography taps into that goal-oriented behavior. You have that which you want, and then you go and you get it. But that's not inherently satisfying. You need a little something more than that. But that leaves you in a vulnerable state. And then if it is completely abstracted from a relationship, then what do you do with all that vulnerability once you're relaxed or once you're exhausted with that? And it could be attached to that object of desire, the actress or the event that they're seeking to replicate in a different way. But I think one fear that men have to deal with when we do get vulnerable is that we are really open to being controlled in a way. And it's not just society that wants us to not be controlled. There's something about us that we have to learn that vulnerability doesn't necessarily degrade our own sovereignty in a way, or being in a trusted relationship is partly that you trust that other person to treat you nice and not reshape you in a way, I guess, in a sense, when you are in that vulnerable position.
Right. And I think that's a crucial part to a healthy relationship, is that both people can be vulnerable, because it's kind of like metaphorically showing your belly, right? Like your most vulnerable spot. And if you don't trust your partner with that, I would ask you to kind of dig into that a little bit more, or reassess that, because to me, that's supposed to be the person that has you when the world is falling apart. Like, that's the person to protect you. That's the person that you guys are going to problem solve and figure it out. So if you can't be vulnerable with them, then who can you be vulnerable with? And throughout life, you just go through so many things that you can't carry that weight by yourself. You need to be able to share these burdens with other people. And if it's not with your partner, again, then who?
Mm-hmm. Why did you start talking on the podcast level of things? What was that, the beginning of that idea for you?
Oh man, I ask myself that that all the time. It was something that I had been kind of toying with for years. I was just way too nervous to actually hit record for my first episode. Again, it goes back to vulnerability. It's sharing something way more intimate than your body. It's like your mind and your essence of a person, and then putting that out there for people to throw stones at. That's really scary. And especially when you have unpopular opinions, then that makes it a little bit more vulnerable and like more intense, because you know what you're going to say isn't going to be accepted by the majority of the people even following you, right? Like they follow me for one thing. So when I start showing other opinions or expressing my mind, they're like, why don't you just get naked? We're not here for that. So there was a sense of imposter syndrome, and that took a long time to kind of get over as well. But I just felt like I saw a lot of censorship happening. I saw a lot of narratives being pushed that I wasn't crazy about. I hate being put in the bimbo porn star bucket. And obviously that person exists. There are plenty of dumb girls in the industry. There are plenty of dumb girls in the world. There's plenty, you're right? Like, intelligence isn't... It's not just in one career. Right. It's not at all. So I just kind of wanted to express myself and say, like, don't lump me in with this stereotype. I'm not that. And if I can kind of show the humanity side of it and have people on and break them down and say, we're very complicated people. There are good people and bad people. I hope that I'm in the good bucket, but just to try to educate some people.
Mm-hmm. How do you know that your opinions are unpopular if you haven't said them? Or how did you know that you had unpopular? What was the feedback? Or did you see it happening outside of you? Or
I started to see, because I just didn't agree with everything I saw around me. I was like, well, this doesn't really make sense to me, and that doesn't make sense to me. I don't really necessarily agree with that opinion. And then I think I started getting pretty vocal around election. And obviously saying that you voted for Trump twice didn't go over so well. And all of a sudden you become this like quote unquote white supremacist, even though I'm barely white at all. Like I'm more Asian than anything. But somehow that doesn't matter. And you become like this crazy aluminum hat wearing person. So yeah, they came for me pretty hard, but that kind of pushed
Which
me
election, 2016 or 2020?
2020. Yeah, 2016 I was really quiet about it because I'm like, I don't agree, but I'm just going to go and vote and keep my opinions to myself. And then I just saw things getting crazier, and then I think also having a child kind of forced my hand a little bit because now it's affecting him, right? Like it's affecting the schools that he goes to. And that's crazy because he's so young. I didn't think I would have to deal with that. So I just want to try to make the world a little bit better for him.
What are some of those things that you saw that raised your eyebrow? And about when did you start noticing kind of a cultural shift or a shift in yourself with regards to the culture you're in?
Oh boy, I'd say it was probably like a year ago, but I would say during all of the like the first portion of lockdown, and then obviously when everything crazy was happening with the riots, you just saw a lot of people on Twitter that were posting like stop your whiteness or whiteness is evil, whiteness is bad, all of this. And I'm like, we're going back to our value is based off of our pigment, and just because it's reversed, I don't understand how that's okay. And then obviously the gender thing has been in the news, circulating a lot, and I'm all for treating humans like humans, right? Being kind to people. I don't know why I feel like I always have to disclose that, but you kind of do when you get into these topics. But to deny the fact that there's a difference between biological boys and biological girls, I think is crazy. And we were talking about it last night over dinner. And like, if we ever reach an apocalyptic state, right, where all of the grids get shut down and we're in this crazy, I don't know, like takedown of America, are you going to say that Selena Gomez is going to protect me as well as my 200-pound, 6'3" husband? Like, because, you know, gender and sex is all a societal construct? Nonsense. Nonsense, right? So it's like these very obvious truths that are being denied, I think is kind of crazy. And when it comes to kids specifically, like obviously the Equality Act just got passed, and they're saying that gender is so fluid that from moment to moment you can change because it's up to you to self-identify. You can have a male teacher all of a sudden identify as woman and start taking little girls to the bathroom. That's crazy to me. I don't want to leave my kid unattended and put in harm's way. So yeah, it's just bringing awareness to certain topics because I have a little baby now.
Yeah. What's your sense of the instability of that way of thinking? How worried are you that that will become entrenched and just continue to destabilize us?
I think we are on a hard swing to counterbalance everything that people think Trump stood for. So I think that's what we tend to do is we're in one paradigm and then we quickly shift to the other one. And for some reason, we can't find this happy middle. And I don't know why. So now we're overcorrecting in kind of a sense. And now we are punishing boys in the way that they learn, right? Like, they're expected to sit down and be completely still and learn at the same pace as girls and perform the same in certain topics like English and the arts, and we're not prioritizing like outdoor play or sports. That's all getting wishy-washy, and unfortunately from the news I've been seeing, I think it's going to be like a really rough like 5 years to 10 years for boys specifically. I think it's going to be up to the parents to make sure that here's an example. It goes back to the content that we consume and how I think that's really important. So you don't realize how much like a Disney movie can affect you growing up. And I never really paid attention to this again until I became a parent. But if you watch most of the children's movies right now, or the family movies, the men are always depicted in a way that they're useless. They're kind of the supporting character. They're dumb. They're weak. They're, you know what I mean? Like they're just there to
Schlubby.
kind of, yeah. And what does that say to our little boys? Like, you're replaceable. You are not needed. You are stupid. This woman is stronger than you. It's not, I don't want my son to feel that way, right? Like, even if you look at Frozen, like the guy's an idiot. The main like prince, he's a moron. We just watched, what was the movie? Yes Day with Jennifer Gardner, and the husband had no masculinity. He wasn't a really great father figure. He was just there to have fun. He was a little bit dopey, and he had to like try to find his voice at the end of it. The mom was kind of saving the day. I don't know. It's not the message that I would want to portray. So it's like, why are, like, do all of these people not have sons? Do they not have brothers or fathers that they love? To just demonize half of the population seems a little bit silly to me.
What film or artifact of literature or movie represents your ideal of the male? Like,
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't know that I've seen anything off the top of my head where I'm like, oh, that's a great one for him to watch.
like Marty McFly or
I haven't seen that one.
Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop or
Well,
I mean,
he's kind of
Back to the
dopey too,
Future.
though, right? Kindergarten Cop. Yeah, they
Yeah.
have him being kind of the dopey, can't get shit done teacher / undercover cop.
Well, he's
and I
good
don't
at
think
one role, he's not good at the other, and that's kind of trying to balance that, kind of getting in contact with his more sociable nature.
And I don't think it, like, again, I think when it comes to expression like that I think is a spectrum, right? Like how we decide to express ourselves, like that varies. So just because you're a man doesn't mean that you have to be like this giant Schwarzenegger meathead, right? If you want to be, that's great. But if you also want to be on the more feminine spectrum, I think that's also wonderful. But I think the problem comes when we're just saying boys in general are bad. Like, that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Do you see any tides that you would want to boost with regards to male self-esteem or male behavior or masculinity? Like what would you think we should do military camps, Boy Scouts kind of thing? Like
I think the Boy Scouts would be good. I think martial arts are amazing for boys. I think it helps build a lot of respect for yourself and for others. I think there's a common misunderstanding that if they go into martial arts or karate, that they're going to be a bully. And that's, I don't know if there's any data to suggest that, because a lot of that has to do with restraint, right? So especially if you're talking about like Aikido, that's all in just like self-defense and using your attacker's energy to just defend yourself. It's not really a go out there and just start chopping everyone in the neck. That's not what it is. Or sports. I think sports are also really great. It's a really good outlet to get that kinetic energy out, especially for young children. And I think it's really important that we all have like those boy groups to talk about what problems like I might not understand as a female, and girl groups to talk about what, you might not understand as a man, and then having these shared spaces. But there's plenty of shared spaces. You can go online, every single platform is shared. So I think it's important not to get rid of these groups that are just based off of biology and like separating them that way.
do you think that we can I guess the interesting thing about a marriage is that you're trying to balance the forces of the masculine and the feminine, and I'm speaking specifically about the heterosexual marriage and caveat, disclaimer, etc. But and you have to balance the masculine and feminine in yourself, and then watch your partner hopefully balance that, and then you guys kind of go on this infinite seesaw. Has that been? What has being married taught you about men and women, if I may ask? I know that
No,
might be
of course.
personal.
So it's really funny. I actually just got back from this neurofeedback training, and they incorporate a lot of spirituality into it. It's really, really cool. I always tell everyone should check it out. It's called BioCybernaut.
Whoa. Could
yeah.
you, do we just take a small detour, and could you describe what
Sure.
neurofeedback is?
So neurofeedback is essentially turning your brain waves into sounds so that you have feedback as to the waves that you're producing. So typically you start with alpha waves, and that's when athletes get into the flow, or when time kind of stops existing, or if you want to get spiritual, it's when things start manifesting for you that maybe you put on a vision board. That's what alpha is. And then there's theta, which is kind of accessing creativity and and information. It's that drowsy thing. They say that Thomas Edison had a lot of it.
Where I started today at our conversation.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Super theta right now.
Yeah, so there you go. But like, if you get in the mystical side of that, that's Akashic records, and that's what the spiritual people would say is when you have that aha moment, you're tapping into those records and you're accessing information from God or source or whatever it is. So yeah, I think everyone should do it. It unpacks the human psyche and consciousness in a way that no one else is really doing it. And what they do is, throughout the process, they essentially have a lie detector attached to your brain. So you have these mood scales, and you have to say, on a scale of 1 to 4 in your highest state of alpha, how incensed did you feel? How willful did you feel? How light did you feel? And you just answer all of these questions. And what it does is, maybe you're not aware that you have all of these anger issues, but they're beneath the surface, and this test is designed to kind of bring those out. That way you can tackle them and leave a happier and healthier person. So what they were saying is, you come into this world in the body that you do for a very specific reason. Like, you showed up as a man for a reason. You were supposed to really harness that more masculine energy. And again, it's not masculine in the sense of Schwarzenegger. It's just more of like the divine masculine, the divine feminine, right? There's this yin and yang happening. And I came into this world as a female for a purpose. So when we start to disalign with that is when you start to see a lot of conflict, whether it's internal or external. And for me, it's kind of, part of it's hardwiring, part of it is life experiences, but I do tend to have a lot more masculine tendencies, and that's caused a lot of strain in my relationships, including in my marriage.
What's a masculine tendency? Like leaving the seat up on the toilet?
No, like I would say, like, kind of having to be the leader, be in control, be bossy. Like, when it comes to income, like, I've kind of always done more, right? So like, there's that, and I feel like that competitive nature. They would say competition is a masculine trait. So yeah, there are things that if I do in excess aren't necessarily going to serve me well, and there does need to be that balance between partners if you're talking, again, heterosexual relationship, for both people to feel their best. So she was challenging me to kind of work on my perfectionism and work on my need to control and stop saying certain phrases like provider or breadwinner when you're talking about things, because those are very masculine, to allow him the space to be those things. Right now I'm taking up too much of it. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that being able to be in a relationship consciously, and then it kind of forces you to gain the humility, to practice the humility to say, okay, I need to practice restraint here, and it's like a teacup and a saucer, and sometimes one has to adjust the other, and sometimes the other has to adjust to the one, and kind of figuring out that dance forces one to either grow or to, I guess, for the relationship to stop at a certain point, whether in time or in development, in a way.
Yeah, I think that's every relationship, right? It's a dance. It's constantly trying to make sure that you're in the best space and that they're also in the best space, because the survival of that relationship, you have to constantly be checking in.
Sorry, I'm being so scatterbrained. You say one thing and then I think about something else, and
No,
I
you're
hope that
fine.
this is all kind of related to itself. This might be. I don't mean to be offensive about this at all, but in the context of young women suddenly receiving male attention. That can be really traumatic for some women,
Sure.
and cause them to kind of hide or, have to deal with that. I'm just wondering, what are the skills that you learn to be confident under the male attention, and what would you like young women to understand about men so that they can have a balanced relationship between that outer kind of force coming onto them without necessarily their consent or even understanding of what that is?
So I guess it depends on how that attention is showing up, right? Is it simply just someone maybe like gazing at you, or is it something that's a little bit more upsetting, or that makes you a little bit more scared, like they're staring at you and they're following you? Like those are very different things. We're hardwired to just constantly look at things and assess them, right? It's just part of it is like survival. So like I know that you're a man walking down the street because I need to be able to maybe go to the other side of the street. Or we're also sexual creatures. So if we see someone and we're attracted to them, you're going to notice them. But there's a big difference between noticing and harassing somebody. I would say throughout my career, I've always kind of been comfortable with that attention. I've actually like sought it out. It's something, I know you're not supposed to say it, but it's something that does make me feel more confident and makes me feel more powerful. And
so you harness that in a way.
Yeah. But there's still times I feel uncomfortable, especially if I'm not in character, if I'm being Candice and not Eva. And maybe like this is in my younger days when I used to go to bars and clubs, but if I would be at a bar or a club and maybe someone would grab me, and I mean, that's terrifying. I think a lot of men make light of those kinds of situations, especially they're like, oh, well, you're young and guys are still trying to figure out how to interact socially. And that part of that might be true. But what like a man will never understand is like the laziest couch potato man can overpower me very easily. And I'm even on a subconscious level very aware of that. So if you put your hands on me without me even knowing you, like that's a really scary and very real thing. So I think it's important for young women to know the difference between what's playful and what's light and what's just natural as far as just noticing you and checking you out versus what is a little bit scarier, and being okay with that line. A lot of it too is when you have these girls that maybe react in such a way to even something that's light or not malicious at all, it comes down to insecurity. So maybe there's a lot of shame around your sexuality. Maybe you just don't know a lot about it yet and you haven't discovered that side of you, and that's totally fine. Like do that in your own time. But I think it's important not to berate a guy that's maybe just asked you on a date because you have some inner demons that you kind of have to work with. And then again, that's very different than a guy that's harassing you or grabbing you. Like those are very real things that happens to probably every single woman on the planet, unfortunately. So yeah, I think sexuality is really complicated, and I think harnessing your own sexuality is very complicated, especially as a female, because we're told it's bad, right? And it's not to say everyone needs to be sexually liberated and start an OnlyFans and never be a mother and monogamy is for the weak. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there's outliers, right? So I would consider myself an outlier. I'm not being inauthentic to myself because I'm more sexual than most women. That's my true self. That's not the true story for most women. Most women actually prefer to have more monogamous relationships and fewer partners, and be a little bit more modest. And I think that's wonderful too. But I think it's finding your identity and being okay with that in a world that is hypersexualizing everything, right? Like I am on that spectrum, but I also think it's problematic to tell women that you have to do this to be empowered, or you have to do this to be liberated from the patriarchy. I think that's problematic too, because you're telling people not to just be who they intrinsically are.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Which is there's no one solution to being who you are.
Right.
And it requires quite a bit of mistakes and probably negative experiences to start to grapple with that.
Of course. I think we all on the path of finding ourselves, right? We do that a lot in our 20s. I think that's what college used to be for. Of course, you're going to make some mistakes and have some hiccups, and that's just part of the human experience. And you have to take those as learning moments, and they're blessings in disguise, right? So I think it should all be welcomed.
And with regards to Candice, the podcasting Candice, what are you learning about her by doing this? What are you learning about yourself? What's coming to light? What are you seeing? What are you experiencing?
I feel like I'm gaining a different sense of self-worth. I think for a very long time, I placed all of my value on how much attention I could get for how I look, or how many followers I could get for how I look, how certain scenes were performing, like these things that don't really matter. And then I'm actually learning that by sharing who I actually am, and learning, because I feel like you're constantly, that relationship with yourself is always evolving, and every conversation you have, every new friend that you make, you learn a little bit more about yourself. So I'm having these really awesome and complicated conversations with who at first are strangers, and I'm learning more about my own values, right? Like, so there might be topics I didn't even know about, and then I talked to James Lindsay for 2 hours, and I'm like, holy cow, I care about all of these things.
James is good at that.
He's wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, I'm learning who I am, I guess, as a mother and as an adult and as a wife, and on a much deeper level, who I am and what my values are.
What is it? What are some of the skills that you find that you have and that you have to work on being an interviewer? What are you good at that? Do you think that you're good at that? And are you getting better?
I have no idea. I'm definitely getting better, because I've listened to the beginning episodes, and I've come a long way. I don't have a background in this at all. I went to school for psychology, and then after that I got into porn and then was an influencer. That's my experience pretty much in life. Influencer, right?
You dropped the I word.
I know, it's so gross. But I think I'm getting better. I think my skills are when it comes to storytelling. That's what feels natural to me. So if it's too much like a traditional interview, I don't really shine there. I have to stop saying so much and stop saying like so much. But I grew up in the 90s in Southern California, and I had terrible role models. So a lot of it's just there, and it might not go away without professional coaching. So there's always room for improvement.
Yeah. And what's coming up for you on your channel, on the Candice channel?
So I'm supposed to have, this is going to sound terrible. I don't know if it's Johan or Johan, because I've heard it pronounced two different ways. Hari coming on. I'm really excited to talk about his book, Lost Connections. It's a little bit older, but he did a recent update to it that includes addiction and kind of what happened with the pandemic. So how social isolation had a negative effect on people's mental health. I have a couple family members. I know, right? It's like some people were saying this from the beginning. So yeah, he brings attention to those really important points. And I have some family members that have struggled with depression. So that's kind of near and dear to me. And I find the conversation around addiction really fascinating. So I'm excited to learn from that guy.
Yeah. This work, what we're engaged in right now, really is about connection in a way. It's a simulated connection, but it's definitely a connection. And you foster a relationship with the stranger that you're meeting, but also you're mirroring that, and then the audience start to get connected to both of you too. It's just, I don't have a big thought to say about that, but there is a lot of connectivity going on in this circuit of podcasting and YouTube.
Yeah, it's really cool. I don't think that anyone really understands the gravity of it yet, unless maybe you're a top 10 podcast in the world, and then maybe you do. But I've had some really awesome emails sent to me even when I first started, about people going through a bout of depression, and like one episode sent them on a journey of improvements and reading and self-education. And that's so cool to me. It's like something that I think is just talking to a friend for an hour or two can totally shift someone's life. So I think that's the coolest part. It sucks because you can't see the people listening, right? So you can't like see their reactions and be like, we're all in this together. Not yet. Yeah. Maybe with like AR, that'll happen.
Well, you just said it loops back to what we were saying about, these men reaching out to you in a state of, distress and asking for you to help them in some way, shape, or form. Do you think that these two, Eva and Candice, are going to be symbiotic? And do you see them maybe having some sort of street fight with Aikido, or integrating and changing one another?
So that was actually something I spent a lot of time on when I was at BioCybernaut recently too, was for a long time I felt like there had to be a divide between Eva and Candice. I felt they could not coexist, and that I had a lot of fear around as long as Eva was, I guess, alive, for lack of better terms, Candice would never be able to be successful in her own right. So I tried to kind of rewrite that narrative in my head that they both can coexist and positively impact one another, and that it's all the same person at the end of the day. Just because there's a different name attached to certain content, it doesn't mean that I'm detaching and becoming a different personality on a fundamental level, right? So it's kind of appreciating the gifts of the Eva side of me and then incorporating the real me into future endeavors. So I guess not having that shame around it and just saying this is going to exist. It always will exist. It's not a bad thing. And that doesn't mean I'm stupid. That doesn't mean I'm unworthy. And that doesn't mean I can't have success in another field.
In the taco sphere.
The taco sphere. Yeah. I like that.
So where can people find your podcast? It's Chatting with Candice. It's on YouTube.
Yep, chattingwithcandice.com, and then on YouTube, my channel is just Candice Horbacz. So, but if you type in Chatting with Candice, it should pop up too.
Can I ask about your name? It's got this CZ at the end. Thank you for saying it out loud. Where's the, is that Slavic?
It's Polish. So I didn't take my husband's last name for 2 years because it's so rough. But then I was like, if I have a kid, I just don't want to have a different last name than my child. So then I changed it. It's actually supposed to be pronounced Horbacz, but no one in his family pronounces it right. So he's been mispronouncing it his whole life. So now I have too. So we're just committed to this awful.
And I have permission now to mispronounce it in the intro.
Everyone does. Yeah. I'm not attached to it. It's fine.
Great. And any other projects? I guess the pandemic has completely changed the landscape, but tours or award shows or...
No, I'm not really doing any of that stuff at the moment. So just the podcast for now, and then we'll see. I think it'd be awesome to maybe do some kinds of trade shows, but I don't know when that's going to be up and running, really.
Swap meets.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Candice, for your morning. I guess it's your afternoon now, but
yeah, no problem. This was fun.
Time. Yeah, and I guess I'll be on your show.
I know. I'm excited.
I wonder what we're going to talk about there.
I don't know, but I hope that you bring your tiger robe.
Okay, so am I allowed? You never know.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I fully support that idea.
I got this thing too, so I can totally F out.
Yes, amazing. It'll be a whole vibe.
Yeah, it'll be a whole vibe. So I guess we'll just hit the ground.
That's electric? What? That's even more amazing.
Vape. Yeah, I go. It'll take a while. I want to do it on camera or anything like that.
So good. So good.
Well, cool. I will let you know when this is out, and thank you for your wisdoms and your insights.
Of course.
Kind of just like woke up, and I had a live stream last night, and I got very theta on it, I guess is the term. It's a very word association. Then I woke up very dreamy and stuff. So thank you for being so graceful with my scatteredness.
No, I appreciate it. It all happens for a reason, right?
Yeah, I guess we'll see.